There's someone I met years ago who's a pretty well-known psychologist. And I said, what does it come down to? I mean, people come to you for everything. And he said, death. He said, whenever I'm working with someone and they're just spinning or I'm bored or it feels like they're not getting anywhere, I just say, so tell me about death. The only constant in our lives is change. And how we relate to change depends how much we're going to suffer or experience stress. That's just one of the basic fundamentals. It's not necessarily what's happening to you, it's how you are relating to it, how you're holding it. And that's why these practices are so powerful. We get to see things we didn't see before. We get to shift our brain waves in a way so that we have more resilience. We develop more emotional equilibrium. And we start to see, if you want to look at the classic Buddha Dharma, we start to see reality. Heavy question, what is reality? Well, what the Buddha said, actually he said this right after he said something else. The first thing he said was, don't believe a word of what I'm telling you. You have to try this on and see if it seems true for you. But one of the characteristics of reality is anicca, or change, impermanence. Anything born of causes and conditions is subject to change. The second characteristic of reality is called dukkha, which is stress, or suffering, or instability, or unsatisfactoriness. So anything you hold on to is going to result in some form of stress and dissatisfaction. And the third characteristic of reality is anatta, sometimes referred as not self. That much of what you call yourself is born out of causes and conditions, and it's subject to change. And the deep inquiry becomes, well, who are you that is not subject to change? What is that? So this whole thing of death, keeping death on our left shoulder, as Carlos Castaneda would always say. Whenever you have to make a big decision in your life, he said, consult with death sitting on your left shoulder. And you'll get an interesting perspective, which sometimes is go for it. For many years, I lived and worked on a farm when I went to college out in Wisconsin, right on the Wisconsin-Illinois border. And we were all meditators, but we also ran a 1,000-acre farm. And I was in charge of 500 hogs. I have that in my resume. Every 4 months we'd have 125 piglets. It was my job to pull them and clip them and cut their eye teeth and spray their navels with iodine and look after them. And it was an amazingly busy life because I would up at 4 and meditate, work with the animals, make it in for my 8:30 class, and wherever it was at 8 o'clock that night I was asleep again. But we had a neighbor, and his name was Jim Luty, and he was a really tough character. And we were just a bunch of vegetarian meditating freaks, But we had some business with him from time to time. And he was a fascinating guy. He was inventing an electric hitch. You could back your tractor up and it would electrically hook up to the trailer or whatever implement. But he was also a high school principal. And he was also had a whole bunch of girlfriends, and he would park his car down at our farm, or park their car at our farm in case his wife drove by. And we were just really having a hard time with Jim, but he would come down from time to time, and he had this real gruff, surly face, and his hat pulled down low, and he was chain smoked, and he drank RC colas all day long. And one of his best lines was Stanley, who worked on the farm. He said, "Stanley, if I had a dog as ugly as you, I'd shave its butt and teach it to walk backwards." That was Jim being playful and friendly. But he started to soften up around us, just because we were, pretty good-hearted people, and we tried to be as pleasant as we could. And we developed some trust with him. Occasionally, he'd come down and eat our food while making fun of it the entire time, of course. But he had a number of heart attacks. It was only 42 or something like that. But one time I was out in the fields, and I got a call from the fellow who ran the farm. He said, Jim's had another heart attack. He'd like us to take him down to the hospital. So we loaded him. We had a big station wagon that we used for hauling feed around. So we had him in the back, and I was with him while John was driving. And I remember I was there with Jim, and I just sort of subconsciously took his hand. I didn't mean to. Then suddenly I thought, oh no, he's going to be so embarrassed. I started to pull my hand away, and then he weakly grabbed my hand. And I thought, uh-oh, this could be something. And so he was talking in my ear about things he wanted, a piece of property he wanted to go to his daughter, and things like that. And I couldn't hear him well because we were driving about 90 miles an hour down the highway. And his eyes were locked on mine the whole time. And then suddenly, he was terrified. His eyes filled with blood. And then he vomited. And his eyes just glazed over, just dull. And we were like 5 minutes away from the hospital. So like in my desperation, I tried giving him CPR on the seat, which wasn't working. So I was yelling at John to stop the car, and he said, no, we've got to keep going. And I just kept saying, Jim, take a breath, just one more breath. We're almost there. One more breath for me. And then suddenly his eyes cleared partially, and he took in a long, deep breath. And then he slowly exhaled, and my eyes were connected with his. And I swear to God, I'm not making this up. His eyes were filled with love. Absolute love. And it was this amazing just a connection. And then like a minute went by, and I said, another breath, take one more breath, we're almost there. And then looking right at me, he'd taken one more breath. And that happened about 2 or 3 times with this amazing connection. And then there was just this sense of like, I can't continue. And then on the last exhalation, his eyes had dulled over. After that was sort of a dream of, going through the whole process. But it was such a powerful experience for me to sort of come and go over the edge with someone. And I really had a distinct feeling that he came back out of concern for me. And that when he did, it was sort of like Jim to sort of Saint Jim, who came back. And that always stayed with me, that very, very powerful experience. So my mother-in-law is in hospice with us at home. And I was just listening to a very interesting interview with someone who wrote the first books on dying. And he said this sort of myth we have in our culture of, the octogenarian, lying in bed surrounded by family, saying a few final words of wisdom and then peacefully slipping away. Like that's the myth, and it almost never happens. It just doesn't happen that way. Well, the weird exception may be my mother-in-law. She's in hospice, but she's not feeling a whole lot of pain. And she's surrounded by her family. Her 3 daughters and her son have all come here to support her at home 24/7. And it's really a phenomenal experience to be with someone who's slowly moving through that transition. And it hasn't been work in a sense. It's just been what needs to happen. So this was yesterday, I think. We set up 3 bird feeders out in front of the window, her bedroom window, and she looks out into the woods. She's oftentimes overcome with sort of ecstatic appreciation. But she would pretty consistently complain that while there were birds, she never saw any animals go by. And she kind of got on that jag, you know. And so wanting to support her as much as we can in her process, we rented a bear suit. It'll be up on YouTube any day. So someone who was renting it for us said, "Oh, well, I'm going to get you a grizzly bear, like a grizzly bear suit." And Tara said, "Well, is it like a real grizzly bear?" He said, "It's got this really big head." And I thought, this is going to be really cool. And I actually kind of looked like, how do you walk like a grizzly bear? Because I really wanted to take it out. And then, so then I went into where this whole thing was in our dining room, and it was like a mascot bear, like a big teddy bear instead. It is the goofiest looking thing you've ever seen. So Tara and I were arm wrestling over who got to be the bear, and she was way too small for the outfit. So we did a whole great thing of, you know, going to the feeder and Tara and I getting into a fight, and she chases me off, I chase her back. It ends up with hula hoops. And, but to see the delight on her mother's face, just you know, of course she realized what a farce it was, and played right along. It's such a powerful reminder of how, in the midst of anything, it's possible to bring ourselves present. It's possible to come back to not only non-judging awareness, but to touch into joy. You could say that joy, that upwelling of joy, is really free from the past and the future. In those moments, you're not obsessing about what might happen. You're not worried or regretting what did or didn't happen. There's just that quality of being really, really present. And that is that's kind of the essence of the practice. That when we consciously practice non-judging awareness, to be aware to this mind which is constantly seeking and wanting more, or moving away from fear and aversion, or just lost in confusion. When you practice non-judging awareness, you begin to see the flow. And over time, you believe it less and less. And that's always one of the wonderful things about practice, is that recognition of, I don't have to believe this thought. So the Buddha talked extensively about the heavenly messengers. That when you experience or when you're close to sickness, old age, or death, and you can actually stay present to it, there's a powerful and radical possibility. Because there is the remembering that this body is not permanent, that all you have is right now, and that recognition that everything changes. And of course we know this. We all know that this body, all these bodies are going to fall away in no particular order. But there's a forgetting, falling into the trance of busyness, of doing, of protecting, of controlling. We have this natural desire to sort of cling to this changing world. And I heard something on the news that just sort of took it over the top for me. I don't know if you're aware that a new thing that is coming forward in cosmetic surgery are beard transplants. These are kind of like the hipsters who, they really want those beards, but their beard is too thin or they don't have enough hair, they're getting beard transplants. And it's one of those wild things. What we do to preserve our our youth and vitality, part of it comes from, of course, responsibility of wanting to be as alive and awake and healthy as we can through this life. But of course, there's sort of the desperation of trying to hold on to a body that is subject to change. So there is something called the 5 recollections that are a recollection of these characteristics of sickness, old age, and death. And it goes like this. If you like, you can close your eyes. It's a little brutal, but there's a power to it. I am of the nature to age and decay. I have not gone beyond aging and decay. I am of the nature to become ill or injured. I have not gone beyond illness or injury. I am of the nature to die. I have not gone beyond death. All that is mine, dear and delightful, will change and vanish. I am the owner of my actions. I am born of my actions. I am related to my actions. And I am supported by my actions. Any thoughts, words, or deeds I do, good or harmful, those I will inherit. So if you like, you can open your eyes, or you can remain with them closed. Some people, when they hear that recollection, there's aversion. Who wants to be reminded that you're going to get sick and get old and die? And who wants to remember that everything that you have, everything you know, everything you love is going to vanish one day? And who wants to remember that anything you do, you inherit those actions? So, of course, some people say, oh, this stuff is really depressing. You know, that is very pessimistic. Some people say, no, it's optimistic. And I like to think of it as realistic. And this is truly what happens. So how would you like to live? And that becomes the deepest question. You know, knowing that all this is falling away one day on some schedule, how do you choose to live? What is most important? I mentioned in this meditation of anapanasati, which is sort of remembering the breath, remembering presence. But that essential quality of sati is remembering who you are. And of course, we forget. A little bit of like yogic philosophy that talks of how does that happen? And the first klesha is called forgetting, or it's literally called avidya, wrong knowledge. And that is that you believe that you are separate from Source. That fundamental belief, which basically is everyone who comes into form, there's some forgetting. And as you forget, you then create an identity. The story of you begins at some point. You're called a name over and over again. You recognize that name as yours. And then you begin to construct a world. And as you form your identity, the next two things that happen is you start to really like some things and not like other things. So your life is filled with aversions and things that you crave. And as that list goes on and gets longer and longer and longer, it leaves you with the fifth klesha, which is the fear of death. And the more that you are identified with your story, the more possibly you will be fearful of death. because everything you've invested your life into is going to fall away. So the remembering of who you truly are is that coming home. And you've had that experience. We get these incredible tastes through our lives, these rememberings. When you feel touched, when you feel the mystery, when you feel just sort of a deep pause, a moment of gratitude, a moment of receiving. This sense of I and mine starts to fall away. Sometimes just for moments, sometimes it gets fractured. Sometimes you can have extended experiences where there's no I, there's no mine. It's just there. So, one of the things in relationship to death, and through many different traditions, is what sounds like a pretty god-awful practice, but it's actually reflecting on the decaying body. And there are actually some guided meditations they're meditations on reflecting on the stages of decay of the body. And part of it is an unflinching recognition of the inevitable. And again, it's not meant to be depressing, it's meant to be liberating. Because you haven't died. What has died is simply the recognition that, or the belief that you're not going to. I had a very interesting experience quite a few years ago. Back when I lived in the ashram, I used to walk barefoot everywhere, go hiking barefoot. And I was out hiking with a friend one day, and I stepped on a honeybee. And I just stopped and pulled out the stinger and kind of waited for a few minutes, and we continued walking. And we were walking down through the woods, and I noticed my armpits were beginning to get really itchy. My scalp was really itchy, and then after a little while, my face started getting really flush. And my friend took a look at me and said, "Wow, what's going on with you?" But we were out in the middle of the woods. We kind of kept on walking, and this was at Kripalu Center, and there's a lake. We went down to the lake, and there was someone who was doing some painting down there. And I kept getting more flushed. And this person said, "Do you need a ride back to the main building?" Which was a pretty long walk. And I said, no, I'll be fine. But she insisted. And by the time we got up to the main building, I was feeling pretty faint. And we had someone on call who had been a medic in Vietnam. And he came, looked at me, and just said, "Get in the car." And I was going into anaphylactic shock from the bee sting. And as we were making our way to the hospital, a number of really interesting things were happening for me. I couldn't remember people's faces. I could remember names. I could remember people's names, but the faces were fading. And then the faces and the names were fading. And my sense of time was getting very distorted. I remember at one corner there was a woman who was brushing her hair, but her hand was moving very, very slowly. And at the same time, or right afterward, I glanced over at the speedometer, and we were going 90 miles an hour in downtown Pittsfield, Massachusetts. And as we pulled into the parking lot, I kept trying to open my door. It was kind of like an arcade game. I couldn't quite reach the handle. And the last thought I had was thinking, why does this guy have to be so touchy-feely and put his arm around me? And then it was, oh, I'm not walking. And he kind of dragged me across the entrance. And the next thing I remember was being on the ceiling, looking down on like 6 people surrounding, and I didn't recognize it as my body. But I could hear all the voices perfectly. Someone was, yelling he wanted the IVs wide open, and people were calling out numbers. And I remember I was just looking down from a very objective point of view. And I thought, there's no way they're bringing that body back unless it's God's grace. And then it was as if I'd fallen from the ceiling onto the table, and the voice in my ear said, "He's back, we got him." And that was a pretty amazing experience. My recovery was really quick, but what stayed with me for a very, very long time was the sense of I was relating differently to my life in a very, very big way. Old irritations seemed to have no effect. I felt very, very withdrawn for a long period of time. Eventually, I started to really see the power that came from that I could be very, very present and very, very still. And I could then begin to feel myself reorienting with the world from a very, very different place. More and more of a feeling just less caught in the drama of it all, but feeling just the presence of the quality of being behind it. And then, of course, that faded away over time. But it becomes a very interesting recollection of what happens when you die. There's a wonderful story of Ramana Maharshi, who was considered one of the great sages of India. And he developed or articulated very beautifully a whole practice of what's called inquiry meditation, where you reflect on a question, but with deep, deep sincerity, and you allow that question to kind of work its magic on you, if you will. He was, I believe, 17 years old, and a dear uncle of his, a young uncle, just died for no apparent reason, just out of the blue. And he was so shocked by the loss. It threw him for into a very, very challenging place, because he loved his uncle so much, but he couldn't understand how could he not be there. So he stayed home from school one day, or maybe he came home from school early, and he lay down on his bed, and he tried to imagine what it would be like to die. And he felt this full relationship to his body shift, recognizing how the body was impermanent. And he began to ask himself, who am I? What am I? And from that experience, that very deep, sincere inquiry into who am I if I am not this body, it created such a profound shift in his consciousness that he basically, from that point on, lived in a very, very powerful articulation of who and what we really are. And so he would say that there are two questions that you can ask yourself. If you ask those questions sincerely, that will peel away the layers of who and what you think you are. The first question is, who are you? And I think an even better question is, what are you? To really look at it with your mind, look at it with your consciousness. The second question is, what do you really, really want? And as you do inquiry meditation, there's an understanding that you stay with the question. And that whole question of what do you really, really want, you can pretty quickly come up with things that you want. But when you stay in the question, is that what you really, really want? So it has a very powerful way of kind of pulling away the layers. I think I'd mentioned before that I've gone to a number of retreats they're actually called enlightenment intensives. And it's 3 days, 18 hours a day, one question in dyads. So someone is sitting across from you saying, please tell me who you are. And for 5 minutes you reflect and you articulate that. And then 5 minutes to the other person, and that's what you're doing for 18 hours a day. It is one of the more brutal things I've ever done. Not only just to sort of hear the narrative of my story, which after a while gets really, really boring. But that compares to nothing compared to how boring everyone else is with their stories. So there's another story of a very, very well-known teacher, and I'm not sure if this story is sort of like considered public knowledge, about him, so I'm going to kind of withhold his name. But it's the story of a pretty famous spiritual teacher who, because he was so deep in this question of who and what am I, it put him into a very deep depression. And he spent a lot of time sitting on a park bench and just sitting and sort of kind of paralyzed by the question. And his depression kind of ran so deep that the thought would come through from time to time, I'm going to kill myself. And then at some point, when he actually felt that as a strong voice, he asked the question, what self would I kill? And it was that question that began to help him to see more clearly into his true nature. So in one form of meditation practice, we are bringing awareness to the senses. When you become aware of the here and now, here of the sounds, you're aware of the touch, aware of the level of tiredness or fatigue, aware of how dehydrated you are. Anytime you check back in with the felt sense of the body, you're bringing awareness to the body. And you're gathering your attention. And in its simplest form, that is very much what this practice is about. It's simply coming back again and again. When you're drinking a cup of coffee, to drink that cup of coffee. When you're washing the dishes, to experience washing the dishes. As you reflect inevitably in your practice from time to time, you can ask yourself, who is aware? Who is experiencing? What is experiencing these sensations? And that question cannot be answered by the mind. It's actually kind of more of an experience. You're kind of initiating an experience. You can think of this in terms of, if you like, sort of a linear model. You can think of it in terms of sort of three steps. The first is, let's say you're focusing your attention on the sounds. So you just take a moment and you experience the sounds. The second step is to ask, who is it that is hearing? Or what is it that is hearing? And the third step is simply to relax. So you have an object that you're focusing on. And then you ask, what is it that is experiencing this? And then you simply relax. So if you like, you can close the eyes. You might like to let your attention come into your breath, kind of calling your attention here. And just to review a little bit of what we explored this evening, you might sense this body, feel the weight of your arms. Can you feel or imagine the space inside your thumbs? Can you feel the breath in your belly? Just reflecting on this body, subject to age, subject to illness, and subject to death. Reflecting on change, all that is yours dear and delightful, will change and vanish. And reflecting on karma, or the law of creativity. Any thoughts, words, or deeds you express, good or harmful, those you will inherit. And you might sense in these moments just a gentle naming something in the object of your awareness, of sound or breath. From time to time to ask, what is it that is experiencing this? And then simply relax. And we'll practice for just a few minutes. And in these final moments, knowing that impermanence is one of the characteristics of reality, knowing that all this will fall away, how would you like to live? What do you love? What enlivens you? What calls you forward? And in your own time, deepening your breath. And when you're ready, you can let your eyes open. There's a saying that meditation is dying while alive. As you're practicing non-judging awareness, you get to see your stories, you get to see your dreams, you get to see that everything is unreal. And the more you practice awareness, non-judging awareness, compassion, the more you become free of that. And the more capacity you have for four qualities that start to emerge. The natural arising of kindness toward yourself and others, the natural arising of compassion for yourself and others, your capacity for joy for yourself and others, and a quality of equanimity, or a quality of steadiness begins to emerge, that no matter what changes, that you cultivate a quality of presence that can be more and more steady. And there can be a quality of childlike wonder from time to time. When you are free from fear and anxiety, and in those moments of stillness, a quality of real innocence can arise. This afternoon, as I went over to say goodbye to my mother-in-law before coming down here, she was on the back deck, wrapped up in blankets. And there's such a quality, a lightness in her nature that's coming forward. And I was a little bit stressed, getting out on time. But she just said, look how blue that sky is. And I looked up and my God, it was a blue sky. And then a few minutes later, she said, look at that bird over there. It's way over there. And wow, there it was. And then she said, when I first met you, you were so busy. Is that changing? I took that as a message from beyond. So thank you for your kind attention tonight. We may have some tea out there, I think, and we do have a couple of